in my lecturing, but I'll catch up. We'll see. I'll catch up. Okay, today we're tackling Chapter 3, Developmental Foundations 2, Personal Identity and Social and Moral Development. Kind of a long chapter. I didn't think it was going to be this long, but it turned out to be that way. Self-concept is typically defined as a person's perceptions about who they are. We can have ideas about our physical capabilities, our ability to socialize at a party, or our ability to do well in this class. Self-concept is further complicated by the fact that an idea about ourself can be very broad, such as I am smart. Most researchers agree that self-concept cannot be adequately understood without looking at both the general and the specific ideas we have about ourselves. An individual's general self-concept is made up of ideas about oneself across many subject-specific areas. Although it is unrealistic to represent all of the potential components of an individual's self-concept, research suggests that specific self-perceptions in the areas of physical, social, emotional, and academic functioning play an immediate role in determining general self-concept. Of particular interest to educators is the academic self-concept, which can be hierarchically divided into specific areas such as a concept in math and English. Our self-concept with respect to math, English, and other academic subjects is usually a well-defined part of overall self-concept. And I imagine you did this when you were in school. You compared yourself to other individuals. You looked at your grade and thought, "Oh, that's a really good math grade. I got an A. I must be smart in math." And the same thing in English. You're reading a book and you see that your book is a little bit more complex than the guy standing next to you. And you're going, yeah, I'm a little bit ahead of that guy. Another factor related to self-concept is self-esteem. Self-esteem refers to an individual's subjective evaluation of their self-worth. That is, self-esteem is how positive or negative, superior or inferior, valuable or worthless we feel about ourselves. We develop our self-esteem through a complex interaction between beliefs about our identity and social interactions with others. These self-opinions are particularly impacted by views held by important people in our lives. There's a constant interplay between how we view ourselves and how others view us. This interaction has been termed reflective appraisal. So really really what matters is who you think is important to you. If it's your next door neighbor that has fighting dogs, that's that's one thing. If it's your parent, usually it's your parents, your grandparents, your extended relatives, your friends, your teacher maybe. Another interesting finding regarding self-esteem is its strong relation to physical attractiveness. This is really weird. Harder's research has shown that even children as young as 4 show a strong relation between perceptions of attractiveness and self-esteem. This is something that we have in our minds from the very beginning, from the time when we're tiny guys. We understand what attractiveness is. The stronger a person's beliefs are about their attractiveness, the higher that individual's self-esteem. Harder's research examined the possibility that other factors might better predict self-esteem. Harder examined other academic success, whether academic success would be a better predictor of self-esteem for gifted and learning disabled students because of its high personal relevance. However, perceived physical attractiveness remained the best predictor of self-esteem. How pretty am I? If I'm pretty enough, I can do anything. Now, this answers all the questions as to why people spend so much money making themselves more attractive. why they spend so much money and we were watching a movie Friday. I think it was Friday. Anyway, it had Zac Efron and the lady from Australia, not Margot Robbie, Nicole Kidman. And Nicole Kidman has had a lot of work done on her face, and you could see it sometimes. Sometimes the camera caught her just wrong, and you could see that she's had work done on her nose and on her mouth and on her chin. It was really kind of odd, but I just think of all the money that people pay to make themselves look more attractive and to stay attractive. That's the part that confuses me. Let yourself grow old. Let yourself be old. Harder proposed that these findings relate to the fact that one's attractiveness is always on display and ever present in an individual's daily life. Other factors like academic success or athletic ability only become significant at certain times. And this is really kind of odd because I was an athlete, I was a college athlete uh, when I was in college, of course, when I was an undergraduate. And it was really important to me. But the reality is, thinking back on my high school athletic success and my college athletic success, I realize it's so transitory. I mean, it pretty soon it doesn't mean anything anymore. Even the fact that I set a record that has lasted for over 55 years. Yeah, 55 years this year. Um, it really doesn't mean anything. What's more important is who I am now, as interesting as that is. But I've never had a problem with attractiveness. Not that I've ever been attractive, but I've never actually been attractive, so that's never been a factor in my life. Regarding attractiveness and self-esteem and gender differences, the most widely reported finding regarding gender differences and self-esteem is that as adults, women have lower levels of self-esteem compared to men. Boys and girls are similar on measures of self-esteem through early adolescence, and then they begin to show differences as they mature into adulthood. Some researchers relate this phenomenon to the relative power men have in our society compared to women. The research also finds that working class men have lower self-esteem compared to white-collar workers, presumably due to differences in their power in society. Harder in 1999 attributes gender differences to societal ideologies regarding male and female beauty. Historically, there has been a greater emphasis on a standard of female beauty. Deviations from this standard are more apparent for women. Susan Faludi in 1999 has speculated that the existing gender differences in self-esteem may decrease in the future as our society begins to develop more defined standards for male beauty. And of course, this is male beauty. Slim nose, full lips, pale skin, double eyelids. Oh, this is in Japan. Okay. And this is really weird too, because in Japan they have what they call host clubs. And in those clubs, pretty men go in there and they flirt with women, and the women will spend money on drinks for the two of them, and they interact. It's just really strange. Of course, we don't have gigolo bars in the United States, but in Japan they do, and they're called host clubs. And women will spend all the money that they have. A lot of women aren't married in Japan. Men scored higher on self-esteem associated with physical appearance, athleticism, personal self, and self-satisfaction. Women scored higher on self-esteem related to behavioral conduct and morality. No differences were found on self-esteem measures related to academics, social acceptance, family, and emotional self-esteem. These findings underscore the importance to consider research in an area collectively. In addition to research on gender differences in self-esteem, many studies have sought to determine whether self-esteem is influenced by racial, or ethnic identification. Chapman and Mullis in 2000 conducted a study on coping mechanisms and self-esteem between individuals who identify as either African Americans or Caucasian Americans. Results from this study found no self-esteem differences between these groups. These results are similar to other studies finding no significant differences between African American and Caucasians in reported self-esteem. An issue frequently addressed is the difference between group self-esteem and personal self-esteem. Group self-esteem refers to an individual's judgment about a group of people to which they belong. Personal self-esteem refers to judgments about one's own personal abilities or competencies. The distinction is important in that individuals' beliefs about their own worth may differ substantially from their judgments about a larger group to which they belong. Educators often need to clarify the nature of a student's self-esteem issues in order to implement effective interventions. At times, it may be that the student is experiencing difficulty with self-perceptions due to personal failures. Other students may experience self-esteem loss due to their ideas about a larger racial or ethnic group with which they identify. Also related to self-concept is the construct self-efficacy. Self-efficacy refers to beliefs about one's abilities to produce effects in the world. Individuals who have high levels of self-efficacy believe they can work hard to master difficult tasks. In other words, they believe they are capable of achieving their goals. Research shows that individuals with high self-efficacy are more likely to view difficult tasks as challenges, rather than threats or insurmountable obstacles. On the other hand, people who have low levels of self-efficacy are likely to dwell on the potential for failure and their own inadequacies or the obstacles they will encounter as they attempt the task. The student's level of self-efficacy may influence the manner in which they approach academic challenges, thereby affecting classroom functioning. Much of what we think about ourselves depends on our social experiences with others. Cooley's looking glass self theory holds that we develop our sense of self according to how others regard us. This theory asserts that a student thinks they are smart or athletic because that is how others view them. They gain this knowledge of what others think through verbal and nonverbal social experiences with parents, friends, classmates, and teachers. According to this model, self-concept represents a child's internalization of the views of others. While the way others see us may influence our self-perceptions, research also shows that we also make our own evaluations about ourselves via social comparisons. Not only does a student listen to others tell him he is good in math, he also compares his performance with the person sitting next to him, his brothers or sisters, or anyone else who he sees as comparable. Social comparisons such as these allow children to measure their performance against the performance of their peers, thereby assisting in the development of their self-concepts. Self-perceptions also develop because of the success or failure a child experiences over time. Research shows that children begin to develop reading self-concepts within the first few months of starting school, and these self-views relate to the ease or difficulty with which they learn to read. Those who learn to read more easily develop more positive reading self-concepts. They also show a higher level of reading performance over time than those with low reading self-concepts. So you tell yourself you either like to read or don't like to read. You can't read good, you're not a very good reader, and this you carry throughout your life. I like to read. And I like to read because, not especially because what happened in school, but my sister bought me a book when I was in the 6th or 7th grade, and she said, you're a reader, you need to read this. And I took that to the bank. I've been a reader ever since. As a matter of fact, I usually read 2 books at a time. Right now I'm reading 2 books at a time. I'm reading a book about, what am I reading a book about? What is that? It's a silly book, a silly story about a wizard, a guy that breaks into the national computer something or other, and realizes that he can be anybody that he wants to be. So he projects himself back into the medieval times as a wizard. And what he discovers is there's a bunch of other people that have decided to become wizards back then. It's really kind of interesting. The other book I'm reading is about prisoner of war camps during the Civil War. And the reason I'm reading that is because I had a great great uncle that died in a prisoner of war camp. Actually, he died at Andersonville. And the last time I was at Andersonville, I tried to find his grave, but I couldn't find it because they didn't even have his name there. But I have a book from the 1880s that says he died at Andersonville. So I'm reading the book. Actually bought the book at Andersonville. There are beliefs about ourselves significantly influence our success in school. Our beliefs about ourselves significantly. As we learned in the previous section, self-concept is multidimensional. This means that we have multiple perceptions about ourselves, including our physical and academic ability, as well as a general sense of our ability to function socially. Each of these parts of our self-concept may influence performance in the classroom. Additionally, these perceptions may interact with each other, making global recommendations for academic success difficult. People who see themselves as physically competent may fare better socially with their peers. This social success may then lead to more positive perceptions of their own emotional functioning. General academic self-concept is moderately correlated with academic achievement, and area-specific academic self-concepts, such as math and English, are strongly correlated with achievement in that area. As academic self-concept goes up, so does achievement. The relation between self-esteem and academic achievement is also positive, with higher self-esteem scores related to higher achievement. In general, students with higher self-esteem are more likely to have favorable attitudes towards school. It is important to remember that a strong relation does not mean that one thing is causing the other. The nature of the relation between self-concepts and academic achievement is still being clarified through research. Self-esteem has been shown to predict how people respond to negative feedback when completing a task. Those with higher self-esteem perform better following negative feedback compared to those with lower self-esteem. Students who score higher on measures of self-efficacy show higher academic achievement. This means if you view yourself as academically capable, you tend to have higher academic scores. In fact, the goals students set appear to be affected by perceived self-efficacy, with those having stronger self-efficacy setting higher goals and exhibiting stronger goal commitment. Vygotsky's notion of teaching within the zone of proximal development fits well with what we know about the development of positive self-perceptions. If we teach at a level within a child's reach while providing sufficient challenge for the child, then genuine success is possible. Genuine success occurs when children's growth is encouraged and their performance is realistically and positively assessed. Promoting positive self-perceptions has met with criticism. Some researchers assert that teachers, in the name of promoting positive self-perceptions, give students easy tasks, overlook errors, de-emphasize failed attempts, and ignore faulty performances. Without challenge, these researchers argue these self-esteem enhancing efforts are in fact self-defeating, since students cannot develop feelings of competence, determination, and personal control. Thus, students need positive yet accurate information regarding their performance, so that they can succeed and feel empowered by their improvement. Yuri Bronfenbrenner was an American psychologist born in Moscow, sorry, I mispronounced it, in April 1917. He had a long and notable career and is best known for his ecological systems theory, which was influenced by Vygotsky, but took the idea of the importance of social influences on development to a new dimension, covering the entire ecosystem of the individual. This theory is a more holistic way of looking at the influences on development, applicable to children through adulthood. His ecological system theory fundamentally altered the way mental health professionals and parents viewed the varied influences on development. Also notable was his influence on the development of the Head Start program in 1965. Bronfenbrenner's primary research focus was on how increasingly expanding spheres of environmental influence dramatically interact and guide expectations regarding a child's development. At the center of four environmental contexts lies the individual. Conceptualization of the individual is important because of their genetics unfolding in the in utero environment. Sets the stage for later influences. And you can see the four concentric circles. 1, 2, 3, 4. The microsystem refers to the next level of influence coming directly from such things as home life circumstances, religious upbringing, school setting, and the neighborhood in which they live. Collectively, these factors work in an ongoing dynamic interplay, shaping the child's development. The next level of environmental influence is the mesosystem, which works in a reciprocal fashion, informing development, but in this case, the emphasis is on how home, religion, school, and the neighborhood influence each other to indirectly impact the developing child. Following this sphere of influence is the exosystem, which does not directly interact with the child, but provides an important contextual framework for understanding how environmental factors provide both upward and downward influence to other ecological spheres within the overall model. This includes things like local industry, school board, local government, parents, workplace, and mass media. This obviously is a courthouse somewhere. The final environment to consider is the macro system, which involves the broadest contextual level playing a role in an individual's development. It is made up of the overarching culture, beliefs, ideologies, and laws present in the child's life circumstance. And this is actually at Fort Belknap, where I used to work. That's up in the mountains. Well, it's only got one mountain. It's up in the Little Rockies. One more notable force exerting influence upon the above system is the continual effect of life events in a forward direction. These events can be any unique life experiences affecting development from the time of occurrence going forward. These historical markers during our lives represent influential, memorable, or other events altering the trajectory of our lives. This is referred to as the chronosystem, and of course, something that has affected all of our lives for 4 years, almost for 4 years, 4 years. COVID-19 affected our lives. We were in shutdown. They closed the school. They didn't want to bring people back. And then in 2023, of course, that was in the spring of 2020. Everything shut down. And then now in 2024, we are back doing things the way we did them before, but we have more online things, especially at the schools, the coronavirus, of course. Examples applying Bronfenbrenner's theories to real life can be found in a variety of situations. Beginning with the first sphere of influence, microsystem, we find application to a wealth of relevant situations in our everyday lives. Potential topics include issues related to the family, school life, and the neighborhood problems, Even when a child comes from a well-structured home life, their school behaviors may conflict with home rules. The conflict raises cognitive tension that can impact the child's ability to meet both home and school expectations. The next sphere of influence is a mesosystem. Recall, this is the environmental area not directly influencing the child, but working in a reciprocal fashion, with each environmental element working with one another to create a life context for the child. For example, learned interaction patterns with neighborhood friends, such as how to appropriately enter and exit a conversation, age-appropriate peer selection, and community-defined dress patterns may interact with the standards in a religious setting. The stronger emphasis in a religious setting on moral code and belief systems may significantly guide a particular type of peer-to-peer interaction. Conflict between how these two venues operate may set up a life circumstance which produces anxiety or issues with self-confidence. The exosystem further delineates types of environmental influence, even though the child is not a direct participant. For example, our society's system of mass media isn't directly participated in by most Americans, but they are influenced by its existence. Mass media elements such as television can shape an individual's goals, emotional tone, and behavioral comfort zones, thereby providing a potentially powerful influence over the direction of development. The macro system consists of the broadest level of environmental influence. One of the parts of the macro system is the legal system. Laws enacted in a given country have a profound effect on the daily lives of their citizens and in many ways the nature and direction of their thinking. And it was it just hit me that one law that has been rescinded is the ban on abortion for since the 70s until last year. Abortion was legal in the United States, and now it's illegal in many states. So you can imagine how that could impact somebody. The fact that they have banned abortion in many of the states in the United States. If you're an individual, let's say you're a baby, and your mother gets pregnant, and she decides that she can't afford a second child, but there's nothing she can do to not have that child now. And so she has the child, and then both children are raised in poverty with food issues, and you can see how that could impact the individual just by passing a law. Erikson's theory is called psychosocial theory of development because of its integration of psychological changes and the social world. He asserted that an individual's unique psychological makeup evolved over time as key events are encountered and resolved. This theory outlines 8 important life events that form the building blocks of individual identity. And that's Erik Erikson right there. He was not born Erik Erikson. He was born. I'm trying to think what his name was. It wasn't Erik Erikson. Anyway, he decided to change his name when he was immigrating to the United States. He's Jewish. And he grew up with blonde hair. So he looked German, but he was Jewish. He was rejected by Germans because he was Jewish, and he was rejected by Jewish people because he looked German. He didn't look Jewish. So he was kind of had both feet in both cultures at the same time. Because if he walked around and didn't say anything, people took him as German. But if they knew who he was, then he had trouble. So just before World War II, he immigrated to the United States, and on the ship over, he decided his name was Hamburger. He was born. He was born in a little town right beside Zweibrücken, where we used to live. My wife and I. Well, we were stationed at Zweibrücken. Anyway, his name was Hamburger, but his first name wasn't Eric. So on the ship over, he decided he was going to change his name. So he decided he would call himself Eric, son of himself, Eric Erickson, son of, and of course, oh, the other problem was that his mother, his the man that his mother was married to was not his father. Um, so when he was 16 years old, his mother told him that the man that he thought was his father, this doctor, this pediatrician that took care of him, was not his father, and that his father was a Danish sea captain. So he decided, but she couldn't remember his name, or she didn't tell him his name. Anyway, so he took off at age 16 looking for his father all over Europe. Never found him, of course. And then on the way over, because he'd been looking for his father, he decided to give himself a Scandinavian name, and he called himself Eric Erickson. As weird as that sounds, I guess it worked because he became a famous psychologist after that. Erickson referred to important social events as developmental crises. A developmental crisis is a particular life event important in the development of individual identity. The individual strives to resolve each crisis, incorporating elements of what he called healthy and unhealthy social influences. Eric believed that both types of feedback were important in the development of the individual. He felt that only when the types of comments that lead to confusion begin to outweigh supportive and nurturing comments does the individual begin to experience a negative outcome to the developmental crisis. So we're dealing with Eric Erickson here, and as we know, Eric Erickson was Jewish and he was living in Germany. He looked German, but he was actually Jewish. And for that reason, of course, social crises would be very important to him. He was continually going through all these social crises, these developmental crises throughout his life. His mother, he didn't know who his father was. He looked one thing, but he was something else. So you can imagine that crisis was one of the major aspects of his life. His mother married his pediatrician, and that was the individual he knew as his father. And he was born in Karlsruhe, but he grew up in Homburg, which is a little bitty town, as I told you, right beside Zweibrücken. Homburg, not Hamburg. Hamburg is with an A. This is with an O. So his name was something Homburger. I can't remember what his first name was. Anyway, not important. Erickson believed the first important developmental crisis encountered involved the issue of trust. The newborn child is essentially helpless and relies on others for basic survival. Most infants receive reliable and relatively consistent care, but even this varies over time. If basic care becomes too variable and challenges the comfort level of the infant may begin to develop a sense that the world is an unreliable place and become mistrustful. We all experience some feelings of trust and mistrust during this important developmental period. It is only those children who experience more mistrustful in situations than trusting and reliable situations that will ultimately achieve an unhealthy resolution of the crisis. Trust versus mistrust. Will they pick you up when you're crying? Will they make bubbles on your cheeks? Children begin to rely less on others over time and begin to enjoy doing things for themselves. This sense of autonomy develops gradually with appropriate and patient guidance from caregivers. Caregivers often have busy lives and have difficulty giving children the necessary time and space to develop these self-help skills. Often children are rushed or discouraged because they take too long or they do not perform adequately. Toilet training is a frequently cited example of one of these important skills. Children are initially reliant on parents or for basic toileting needs. However, during this developmental crisis, they begin to take control of this aspect of their lives, developing an overall sense of self-sufficiency. Toilet training is just one example of the many situations that children are faced with that influence the resolution of the autonomy versus shame and doubt crisis. So the first crisis is, will they pick me up when I'm crying? And the second crisis is, ouch, I've got to potty train. Now I can't poop in my pants anymore. That's the second crisis. Erikson theorized that the next major issue children work through involves the desire to become an increasingly active participant in life. Children at this stage love to initiate activities and are constantly moving from one task to another. This can present problems for parents and caregivers who typically have more limited energy and time to devote to these tasks. This results in some requests being denied or discouraged and others supported. Parents who discourage child-initiated activities need to be careful how the situation is perceived. Children may feel that they have unduly burdened their parents and develop feelings of guilt. Parents who are sensitive to a child's needs to initiate activities help them understand that practical limitations of daily life. So the third crisis has to do with finding things to do. Now they have to find things to do on their own, and their parents can't play with them anymore. So they have to entertain themselves. That's the third crisis, initiative versus guilt. And the guilt that they feel is the fact that they're tying up so much of their parents' time. Will they be able to play by themselves? At some point in a child's life, activity initiation becomes secondary to task success. This co-occurs with the beginning of formal education. Students quickly learn to make comparative judgments regarding their work and the work of others. Success becomes more important as students attempt to receive favorable grades, and they often use the performance of other students to assess their own. When teachers and parents help students select a range of activities that results in a satisfactory amount of overall success, feelings of inferiority are minimized. Students who do not receive such guidance are at risk for attempting too many tasks beyond their current attempt level and coping with a sense of failure. So they need to be either industrious or they feel inferior. So this is them competing with the people with their cohorts, with their classmates. One of Erikson's developmental crises surrounds the establishment of identity. He held that it is important for young adults to establish an identity in occupation, gender roles, politics, and religion. Without successful identity formation in these areas, the adolescent is likely to experience role confusion. James Marcia has expanded on Erikson's early work. Marcia's theory provides additional insights into the process of developing a sense of identity. He identified 4 identity statuses to explain unique differences in how young adults search for an answer to the question, who am I? Each of these 4 identity statuses involves the concepts of exploration and commitment. Exploration is the idea that the individual is actively experimenting with different lifestyles and ways of being in the world. Commitment is when an individual has decided on a particular identity. Marcia's first identity status is identity achievement. This status is characterized by both exploration and commitment. Individuals have investigated relevant options and have committed to a particular way of life. Research indicates that only about 20% of 18-year-olds achieve stable identity, though this number increases to around 60% by the age of 24. Identity foreclosure is characterized by commitment but not active exploration. Individuals taking this approach to establishing an identity readily commit to a particular way of life without exploring other options. Frequently, this is seen when a young adult simply adopts the lifestyle of their parents. They attend school for the same career, hold similar political and religious views, and recreate familiar gender roles in their own home. A less typical pattern involves the individuals making a strong and immediate identification with a persuasive group or a group that effectively advocates for the individual to join. Rather than seeking out a group affiliation through exploration, the individual simply assumes the qualities of a group who strongly solicited their membership. Either of these foreclosure patterns is potentially problematic. Individuals who have not experienced different ways of living tend to be less tolerant of alternative lifestyles. So what are we seeing here? And I saw this in college when I was an undergraduate. A lot of individuals just wanted to do whatever their parents wanted them to do. They weren't going to college to find themselves or to find what they wanted to do. They just accepted what their parents wanted them to do. Most of those people are dead. And the reason I say that is because they started studying things that they weren't really interested in, and they got jobs that they didn't really enjoy. And if you don't enjoy your job, then going to work every day is a chore, and that's no fun. Now, I really enjoy what I do. I like working. I enjoy working. Obviously, I'm 75 years old and I'm still working, and I don't do it for the money, I can assure you that. Anyway, so my point is, and like I said, a lot of these people have died. Doctors, if you don't enjoy medicine, then by golly, don't get into medicine. Ouch. That's not smart at all. Lawyers, you can make a lot of money that way. If you're just doing a job for the cash, you're going to be out of luck. That's for sure. And this is a real serious problem. And the other thing is the groups that they were talking about. Of course, when Erickson talked, or when Marcia talked about identity foreclosure, and he's talking about groups, I was thinking of religious groups because they kind of get you to become part of their organization, and they just kind of rope you in, and you can't get out. And of course, most people are the same religion as their parents, and that's okay. I mean, they've been indoctrinating you since you were a child, so I guess that makes sense. Anyway, okay, identity foreclosure. Identity diffusion is an approach to identity formation that involves neither exploration nor a strong commitment. Individuals experiencing diffusion make few attempts to engage in activities that help to establish a strong sense of identity. They're not committed to any ideology, nor do they maintain stable group affiliations. This identity status is also problematic and may result in disillusion, withdrawal, or apathy. And this is where because of identity diffusion, we see a lot of depression. And we see depression because the individual has no place to go, or they're not headed in a specific direction. This is a problem that we see with a lot of individuals who smoke marijuana. Marijuana makes you not want to do anything, and by golly, they don't. They just kind of sit around and don't do anything. And when they're not smoking pot, they're grouchy. So that's we see a lot of identity confusion. We see it a lot in gamers. I'm not saying gamers smoke pot. I'm saying we see it a lot in people that play video games, because actually they're not really doing anything. They're playing video games, but it's not leading to anything. They're not gaining knowledge. They're not going in any specific direction. And unfortunately, you can do that for your whole life if you want. Play games all your life. Kind of works. Identity moratorium is a process by which the individual focuses on exploration, delaying making any commitment. because they're always trying to figure out who they are. This approach is becoming more common as young adults postpone early commitments in favor of a more protracted exploration during the college years. Building on our sense of identity, we're back into Erikson now. We're away from Marcia. Building on our sense of identity, we move toward life experiences involving the development of a deeper connection or intimacy with another person. To develop a successful intimate relation with another, a person must first successfully resolve the identity stage. To develop a mutually satisfying intimate relationship, we need to have a sense of our own individuality. Sharing ourselves with others is an intimate way in an intimate way involves the potential loss of personal independence. Individuals who are trying to move toward relations that are more intimate may resist this loss of independence, resulting in frequent breakups and a failure to maintain a mutually loving bond with another. Thus, the inability to obtain successful intimacy leads to isolation and loss in life quality. The journey into middle adulthood is met with a growing sense of obligation to others and to the next generation. Individuals who successfully, wait a minute. So I'm talking about what the problem is. This has to do with getting married and finding someone. Intimacy versus isolation. You're going to live alone or are you going to get married? That's what that one's about. This one is about what do I do? What positive thing am I going to do in my life? That's what it's about. The journey into middle adulthood is met with a growing sense of our obligation to others and to the next generation. Individuals who successfully negotiate this stage develop ways to nurture their sense of productivity and creativity. Having and raising children is an approach many individuals take toward a successful resolution of this stage. Erikson did intend a broader interpretation of nurturing and productivity. He believed that in addition to the raising of children, individuals also begin to develop a sense of responsibility to their communities and to the world at large. To foster these additional avenues of productivity, individuals begin to take a more active interest in community projects, social causes, and world issues. Individuals who fail to develop such endeavors may feel a sense of stagnation and an approach to life characterized by fruitless, repetitive daily activities. Okay, so there's two ways you can go. You can either raise your own family, or you can help your community, according to this guy. Now this is really kind of interesting because Project 2025 didn't just come out. It's been out for a while, but it has to do with what if Donald Trump is elected president, and potentially what he's going to do. And one of the things in there has to do with having families. And according to the Republicans, everybody needs to make babies. And if you don't make babies, then you're going to be an angry Catwoman. That's what J.D. Vance said. A little weird. Anyway, I just thought I would mention that since it's been in the news so much lately. Angry cat women. That's what he says of women who don't have children. One of the last personal crises with which we struggle is the acceptance of impending death and the fact that our lives are primarily historical rather than in the future. It is important that older adults reflect back on their lives and see a life lived with purpose. This leads to the individual to a sense of integrity, and that life was well lived. Individuals who fail to experience this perspective on life have difficulty resolving this crisis in a positive way, even falling into despair. He's falling into despair. And this kind of happened to me last week. I had a cardiac episode. And they took me to the emergency room. Then they put me in the hospital. And of course, half the time, part of the time, I'm falling asleep and I'm having these really vivid dreams. And of course, this is one of the things that I was dreaming about was the fact that my life was historical. I look into the future, and I realized, well, geez, I'm going to be around for a lot longer. I don't have to worry about this now, but I was looking back on things and I was saying, I did okay. I did okay. So at least I have convinced myself that I have integrity versus despair. Okay. The lifelong search for who we are is profoundly influenced by the events, people, and experiences we have during our school years. From that one all important teacher to the school nurse or that favorite physical education teacher, people from our school years play a pivotal role in our personal growth. One of the most interesting changes we are seeing is the increasing amount of time children are spending in structured educational settings at younger and younger ages. This trend furthers the significant impact of others outside the family on a child's development. Erickson's theories give the preschool instructor caregiver an effective framework for providing a stimulating and nurturing environment. From Erickson's first stage, the importance of providing a consistent approach to early care services, service providers for infant care need to be sensitive to the needs to develop a sense of trust. This is challenging when infant to caregiver ratios often exceed 4 to 1. Staff ratios are typically governed by state laws. Imagine how many infants you could care for at one time. My niece had triplets. She was doing IVF and they implanted 4 and she came out with 3. Um, and I'll tell you, she needed help. Her sister helped her most of the time. Appropriate staffing makes it possible to provide young children with responsive care in a structured setting. Careful scheduling of infant care is important, but caregivers should also maintain a certain amount of flexibility to meet the dynamic needs of individual children. This will lead to the child developing a trusting view of the world and will provide a solid foundation for the next developmental crisis. As children develop and become more capable of self-mediated activities, the preschool teacher becomes an important support for autonomous behavior. Most daily activities at the preschool level are fairly regulated, given the need to supervise numerous students with limited staffing. This may lead teachers to favor more direct assistance for tasks rather than allowing students the time needed to complete tasks more autonomously. More direct assistance, however, creates an environment where children may doubt their ability to complete tasks. To avoid this difficulty, preschool teachers can create flexible instruction plans that focus more on process as opposed to completion. Many visit to any visit to a local preschool will immediately demonstrate that children love to initiate activities. Preschoolers will constantly ask to start one task after another, usually oblivious to the time needed to set up the activity or the energy needed to clean up after they move on to another task. This may lead to frustration on the part of the preschool teacher. With multiple students for each teacher, being able to meet the demands for rapid task turnover is incredibly difficult. Children make multiple requests for activities, often becoming upset when they have to wait. Part of this waiting process is educational because it teaches the child the realities of operating in a social world, though teachers may inadvertently communicate another message if they are not careful. Subtle cues of voice or body language may communicate to a student that their request is unreasonable and lead to the student feeling guilty for asking. Although students need to develop a realistic sense of what is possible in a structured care setting, feelings of guilt are counterproductive. Teachers who reinforce and validate student efforts to begin new activities while providing guidance and limits are less likely to undermine the development of a sense of initiative in the children. Even children who have an extensive history of structured care traditional school from traditional school from a different perspective. I struggled with this when I wrote it. I struggled with this because experience is the verb. And let me read it correctly, okay? Because I kept going over it time and time again, and I had a difficult time getting it right. And so as I'm reading through it, I mess it up. Even children who have an extensive history of structured care experience traditional school from a different perspective. That's it. Schools are charged with creating learning environments, but issues surrounding learning progress and accountability keep assessment an integral part of the process. And of course, we struggle with assessment at Dene College as well. Assessment refers to any activity or experience that gives the teacher a sense of the child's progress. Assessment has many advantages, but it also is one of the chief mechanisms fostering peer comparisons. Peer comparison leads to greater importance being placed on success during the formal school years. All children will confront both success and failure, but it is important to monitor task development to facilitate as many successes as possible. This is particularly important during the elementary school years. Children build their academic sense of self during this important time, and teachers are significant mediators of their perceptions of academic success. Teachers provide students with choices, encouraging specific activities, or providing needed structure to help promote a successful outcome. Children will show individual variation in their need for such guidance, so an accommodating classroom is necessary. A fourth grade math teacher will likely find that students will vary in their progression through the material. She may begin with an overall lecture to the entire class, providing the basic information needed to begin independent or small group work. During follow-up sessions on the materials, she can place children in groups of varying size and composition to help ensure the success of each child. She might choose to group students according to a common skill level, minimizing the perception that that some students are too far ahead or behind. And I'm trying to erase the PERC now that I understand. She might also group more advanced students with those students struggling with the material. This would help the advanced students develop an understanding of the material from the perspective of the teacher, while providing the necessary support for the students needing more assistance. She might also choose to allow students to work independently at the beginning, while she works with students individually and focuses on basic skill mastery. Once a foundation is achieved, the teacher can move on to other learning tasks. Building on the foundation laid during the earlier grades, the secondary grade student begins to seriously navigate the complex factors influencing a sense of self. This often presents unique problems for teachers as students begin to demand a wider range of personal and academic freedoms to engage in their search for self. Teachers often learn to accept a greater range of appropriate dress and manners as students attempt to find an accepting and personally meaningful peer group. Teachers who provide a supportive interaction style while setting clear limits regarding appropriate behavior are likely to have less difficulty dealing with identity-related issues in the classroom. Teachers are in a unique position to provide objective and constructive support for choices. Those who take a narrower stance during this time may find themselves in an antagonistic environment where little education or growth is possible. Socialization refers to the way in which other members of our society influence our behavior. While our earliest socialization experiences are usually provided in the context of the family, once children reach school age, teachers and peers become important agents of socialization. Socialization and biology interact in an extremely complicated manner in personal development. The way a parent helps the child with a wait and see attitude to handle new situations may have long term influences on personality and adjustment, including the degree to which they seek out relationships and interactions with other people. Research shows that early parenting styles that are sensitive and responsive to infants' individual temperamental characteristics are related to positive long-term outcomes. Parenting continues to be a major socialization influence in later childhood and adolescence, with responsive parent-child interaction patterns leading to healthier personal development. And it looks like she's got that kid in the basket. She doesn't, I don't think. I think he's behind it. When a child enters school, we've seen this lady before. Wait a minute. Yeah, there she is. Yeah. When a child enters school, teachers become important agents of socialization, influencing relationship formation, social competence, and the development of prosocial behaviors. Teachers who are responsive to the individual variability in students' social behavior are more likely to foster the development of social competence in the classroom for all students. Now, wait a minute. Let's see if we can find that kid with the striped shirt. Nope, he's not there. But there's the kid with the peach-colored shirt. It's the other kid in the picture. Some kid with a green shirt on. Yep, there he is. There's a green shirt. Green shirt. There's the peach-colored shirt. It's the striped shirt we don't have. Studies also show peer relationships are an important component of socialization and personal development, playing a role in the development of self-perceptions and predicting social competence. Peer acceptance, or the degree to which a child is liked or disliked by peers, is an important element in a child's socialization experience. Research shows that a child's ability to get along with other children predicts adjustment in adulthood. Children with social deficits are likely to experience continued interpersonal difficulties as adults. A child's peer acceptance category refers to the degree to which they are actively liked or disliked by their peers. This status within a classroom exists on a continuum, and the characteristics associated with lower peer status include social class, race, ethnicity, and disability status. A significant body of research has been conducted to examine the characteristics of children who are actively disliked or rejected by peers. Classmates generally identify these children as the least liked in the class, and they're often socially isolated or actively excluded from peer activities. Studies show that peer-rejected children differ from non-rejected children in many ways, including their behavior, social problem solving, aggressive behavior, activity level, and the cognitive and academic functioning. Research suggests that the link between rejection and aggression may be mediated by how peers think about the rejected child's behavior, such as interpreting ambiguous actions as hostile. Not all rejected children, however, are aggressive. Non-normative or unusual behavior has been linked to rejected status in non-aggressive children, with non-aggressive rejected children being described by peers as strange or socially awkward. Peer rejection has been linked to several negative developmental outcomes, including dropping out of school, engaging in delinquent behavior, and experiencing emotional and psychological problems. Some children are not actively disliked or excluded, but neither do their peers actively like them. These children are often referred to as peer neglected. They are frequently onlookers who are not excluded from the group but do not actively participate. Peer neglected children are often quiet and have few friends, either by choice or because of problems interacting socially. While teachers often easily identify peer rejected children, the neglected status of a child often goes unnoticed by teachers. Teachers may view these children positively in terms of motivation, independence, and classroom behavior. Neglected children do not appear to be at an increase for negative developmental outcomes. And research shows that children may move in and out of the neglected status over time. Research has shown that peer neglected children are highly motivated and are self-regulated learners, learners with compliant behavior. Children who are well liked in a classroom have been shown to exhibit such characteristics as concern for others, helpfulness, cooperation, and empathy. These characteristics, and they're pretty too, you got to remember they're pretty. These characteristics appear to be related to social cognition and perspective taking. Studies show that children with high peer acceptance are more likely to engage in associative play, social conversation, and acceptance of peer overtures, and they also show a social cognitive pattern that prioritizes the maintenance of harmonious relationships with peers. The peer-rejected children often behave in ways directly opposite to the behaviors of peer-accepted children. Peer-rejected children are likely to interpret ambiguous overtures as hostile, whereas peer-accepted children are more likely to perceive benign intent. Thus, children who show high peer acceptance are likely to exhibit prosocial behaviors and have more positive social cognitions. This knowledge of the characteristics associated with peer acceptance provides us with a foundation for developing interventions to facilitate social competence and peer acceptance. Early in life, we begin our journey towards successful socializations. Some of socialization's early learning involves verbal customs observed in society. We learn verbal means to socialize as well as nonverbal social skills through our socialization experiences with family members, teachers, and peers. Use of verbal and nonverbal communication skills appropriate to a given context is called pragmatic language. Research shows some children pick up these skills more easily than others do. Children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, tend to have problems learning proper behavior. They often have problems such as standing too close to other children, speaking too loudly during conversation, and not taking turns during conversation. These behaviors can cause a child with ADHD to have problems with peer interactions, which are an important part of healthy personal and social development. Non-native English speakers or those from culturally diverse backgrounds may also learn different pragmatic language skills such as amount of eye contact, use of gestures when speaking, or loudness of voice. These differences may contribute to perceptions of difference on the part of the other students and may result in peer acceptance issues. Social skills are observable and measurable, and they can be conceptualized in terms of overt behaviors. The ability to use social skills appropriately within a given context to function effectively represents a child's social competence. Social competence is based not only on the social skills a child has learned, but also on how they are used and received by other children in a given context. Social competence exists on a continuum rather than being an all or none phenomenon. We would not say a child either has social competence or not. We would consider instead how much competence the child exhibits. Social cognitions, or the ways in which we perceive or think about social situations, also influence our social relationships. Like social skills, social cognitions develop through our socialization experiences. One of these social cognitions is the ability to take the perspective of another. The perspective taking ability increases children develop as children develop. I'm sorry. The perspective messed me up. I couldn't get through the rest of the sentence. The perspective taking ability increases as children develop cognitively and become better able to view an issue from another's perspective. Perspective taking. While perspective taking begins to develop in very early childhood, young children continue to be egocentric or dominated by their own perspective. As they become more effective perspective takers, children are better able to handle conflict more successfully, are more likely to display empathy and compassion, and are more likely to be accepting of difference. Children who are poor perspective takers are less likely to accept those who are different and are more likely to resolve conflicts in an aggressive or negative manner, often misinterpreting the actions or intentions of other people as hostile. Of central importance in any social skills intervention effort is the actual social validity of the skills being taught. The skills should be meaningful and functional in the specific social context where they are to be used. Contextualized approaches to teaching social skills are necessary, whereby members of the peer group provide input regarding functional skills and serve as a relevant training group. The classroom provides an optimal environment for promoting positive social interactions, and the classroom teacher can play a key role in helping students develop both social skills and social competence. In order to do this, teachers must be able to identify children who are having social difficulties in the classroom. They must then identify the target situations where the breakdown in social competence occurs. This could be on the playground, in group activities, or in the classroom. The teacher must identify the behaviors peers deem as important and set up an environment for teaching these behaviors. This may involve any number of activities, such as explicit role-playing exercises among members of the classroom, modeling on the part of a socially accepted peer, group problem solving, or direct instruction and practice within the peer groups. Once the behaviors are learned and implemented appropriately, they should be naturally reinforced within the peer group context. Research clearly implicates prosocial behaviors in peer acceptance. This includes behaviors such as empathy, cooperation, and helpfulness. These behaviors hinge on the ability to take the perspective of another and to accurately assess the thoughts and intent of others. To promote the development of these behaviors, teachers may use a variety of strategies aimed at explicitly pointing out multiple perspectives or multiple interpretations of ambiguous situations. Teachers with a diverse classroom are in a unique position to promote perspective taking, since multiple perspectives can be explicitly examined and validated, promoting a diverse array of friendships and peer interaction patterns. Researchers who study perspective taking often use a scenario-based approach where a situation that can be interpreted from several different perspectives is presented. Using these scenarios, Robert Selman and colleagues have explored the developmental progression of perspective taking ability, describing 5 levels of ability. While the age ranges for each level are quite broad, and there is much individual variability in the development of perspective taking, Selman's model can help a teacher broadly determine where to start with students of a particular age range. And that's Robert Selman right here. Okay, way to go, Robert. Wait a minute, we've seen that head before. Assisting students in developing accurate assessments of the behaviors and intentions of others is particularly important for students who frequently misinterpret social cues. Recall that students with low peer acceptance tend to perceive hostile intent in an ambiguous situation, whereas students with high peer acceptance tend to see benevolence. Like perspective taking, accurate and positive social cognition patterns can be promoted using a variety of strategies. And I just have to look back at this yellow one. There he is. Same guy, different thoughts. Oh, his brain has turned colors. There we go. Morality generally refers to an established standard for human conduct. When we make decisions regarding right or wrong in ill-defined situations, we must make moral judgments that are quite subjective. In order to make these judgments, we can consider situational factors as well as our internalized standards of moral conduct. One of the first researchers to investigate moral reasoning was Jean Piaget. Throughout his work on cognitive development, Piaget was fascinated by how individuals of varying ages interpreted the same moral situation. This original research generally showed that children around the age of 6 reason qualitatively differently than 12-year-old children. When presented with a situation involving a moral transgression, a 6-year-old child is likely to make decisions about an appropriate consequence based on the magnitude of the transgression. And this is supposed to be a 6-year-old, and this is supposed to be a 12-year-old. That's what it said in the picture. 6-year-olds typically ignore information about intent and center on amount of damage. Piaget referred to this type of reasoning as moral realism. His studies indicated that as children get older, they begin to appreciate the importance of intent in making moral decisions. This more encompassing view was termed morality of cooperation. In addition to the importance of recognizing intent, children moving, recognizing intent, oh no, there we go. I'm sorry. Recognizing children moving from moral realism. Let me read this sentence over again because I left a chunk in there. I should have taken it out. In addition to the importance of recognizing intent, children moving from moral realism to the morality of cooperation begin to change their views of rules. Initially, children view rules as absolute and independent of the situation. Later, children come to realize that rules are made by people and, as such, can be modified by people. This is why Piaget labeled the latter approach to moral reasoning as the morality of cooperation, because rules are essentially mutually agreed upon standards. Rules only have meaning by the cooperation of the individuals following them. At about the same time that Piaget's publications on moral development were receiving increasing attention in Europe, not in the United States, Lawrence Kohlberg was beginning to publish what was to become one of the most well-known and controversial theories of moral development. Kohlberg's theory of moral development was a stage theory like Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Kohlberg's approach to investigating moral development involved presenting research participants with brief scenarios called moral dilemmas. These dilemmas presented the research participant with a morally difficult situation and asked that the participant provide an answer and an explanation. And here's Heinz's moral dilemma. In Europe, a woman was near death from a special kind of cancer. There was one drug that the doctors thought might save her. It was a form of radium that a druggist in the same town had recently discovered. The drug was expensive to make, but the druggist was charging 10 times what the drug cost him to make. He paid $200 for the radium and charged $2,000 for a small dose of the drug. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could only get together about $1,000, which is half of what it cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell it cheaper or let him pay later. but the druggist said, "No, I discovered the drug and I'm going to make money from it." So Heinz got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. Should the husband have done that? This is the Heinz's moral dilemma. Housebreaking. At the pre-conventional level of moral reasoning, moral decisions are typically based on consequences that have personal impact. That is, children reason through a situation by assessing its impact on their own functioning. Decisions made at stage 1 of the pre-conventional level revolve around avoiding punishment, while the focus of stage 2 reasoning is on reward. Both orientations involve an outcome that has direct bearing on the individual. Consistent with a staged approach to development, Kohlberg held that children first reason at stage 1 of the level, moving toward a stage 2 orientation as they develop. And this is the pre-conventional level of moral reasoning. The second level of moral reasoning outlined by Kohlberg is the conventional level of moral reasoning. At the conventional level, moral reasoning is based on the expectations of individuals other than the self. The child begins to look beyond their own interests and consider the cost of failing to conform to the expectations of others or of society. When a child makes moral decisions based on the expectations of significant others, they are reasoning at a stage 3 of the conventional level. When they begin to make moral decisions in terms of larger societal laws and norms, they move into stage 4 of the conventional level. At stage 4 of the conventional level, children develop a member of society perspective. Thus, individuals who reason at the conventional level make decisions based on the expectations of others. They likely believe that rules must be upheld consistently regardless of the situation. At the post-conventional level of moral reasoning, reasoning goes beyond specific laws or personal expectations and is based on the underlying principles for such laws. When individuals base their moral reasoning on the underlying principle behind the rule or fundamental concepts like justice, integrity, or personal philosophy, they are reasoning beyond the conventional level. Individuals reasoning at stage 5 view laws as important, but they see that laws must be questioned if they do not uphold individual rights. At stage 6, morality is based on universal ethical principles of right and wrong on which laws are based, such as justice and respect for human rights and dignity, which may conflict with the transcendent social laws and rules. While Kohlberg's theory differentiates between stage 5 and stage 6 post-conventional reasoning, it appears that stage 8 morality may rarely be reached. Stage 1 through 5 have received substantial empirical support. Stage theories, such as Kohlberg's, are usually criticized for their oversimplification of development. They make it appear that development is a linear process traveling in a forward direction and never back. This almost never adequately describes real-life development. Consistent with this perspective, studies have shown that although the stage order proposed by Kohlberg is generally true, it is too simple to capture the unique path of an individual takes toward higher levels of moral reasoning. Individuals may move in a 3-step forward, 2-step back modality. We often make significant gains in our moral reasoning ability only to fall back to more immature reasoning. Another often cited criticism of Kohlberg is that he focused too heavily on hypothetical moral decisions rather than actual moral behaviors people exhibit in everyday life. Kohlberg investigated moral reasoning using fictional narratives where respondents reported what they would do in a similar situation. His actual moral decision scenarios, the Heinz dilemma, are potentially problematic because what people say they would do in response to a written scenario and what kind of behavior they would engage in if placed in the situation may not be the same. There is evidence that moral reasoning does indeed relate to moral behavior. Perhaps the most significant criticism of Kohlberg's theory is that his research was initially based on a study of males. Kohlberg's original theory, published in 1963, was based on a core group of boys 10, 13, and 16. Later studies extended his findings to other ages and to girls, but the basic theory remained the same. This has led some researchers to question the appropriateness of extending these findings to all individuals. Carol Gilligan provides another perspective on moral reasoning. She believes that although Kohlberg's characterizations of morality may indeed apply to all individuals, there is another dimension to morality that may be more important to women. She views Kohlberg's theory of morality as a theory of justice, whereby moral reasoning seeks to establish a position with respect to equality or oppression. Gilligan does not negate that this is an important quality of moral reasoning, but she argues that there is another morality, a morality of caring. From this perspective, morality is driven by the just treatment of others, but by the appropriate care of those in need. Now, both Gilligan and Kohlberg were at the same university. They're both at Harvard. And Gilligan attacked Kohlberg. Kohlberg wasn't really used to that. And Gilligan parlayed the whole argument into becoming the head of the women's studies at Harvard. Really kind of a strange situation. Eventually, Carol Gilligan got married, and she had two sons. And after she raised those sons, I was going to put a picture of her with her two sons, but after she raised her sons, she realized that boys really are different than girls, and that she kept calling them stinky boys. Anyway, it's really kind of interesting that she was so adamant about this moral reasoning, and for the longest time, she would say that it was the morality of caring that was more important than the morality of justice. But after raising two boys, she stopped doing that. She no longer teaches. I don't think she does, but she writes books on cooking. As weird as that sounds. Anyway, aggression is a long-standing problem in our schools. Some researchers differentiate between direct and indirect aggressive behaviors. Direct or overt aggression includes behaviors such as teasing, taunting, or hitting. Indirect or relational aggression includes intentional exclusion or rumor spreading. Research indicates that gender differences exist in the use of overt versus relational aggression, with girls being more likely to take a relational aggression approach. Aggressive behavior can take many forms, but generally involves the immediate intent to harm another. The classic manifestation of aggression in schools is the bully. Bullying is typically seen as a specialized subset of aggressive behavior. Green in 2000 defines bullying according to 5 main elements. The bully intended to inflict harm or fear upon the victim. Aggression toward the victim occurs repeatedly. The victim does not provoke bullying behavior by using verbal or physical aggression. Bullying occurs in a familiar social group. The bully is more powerful, either real or perceived power, than the victim. Bullying, whether overt or relational, is a pervasive phenomenon. There have been several large-scale studies in a variety of countries, including the United States, and prevalence rates appear comparable cross-culturally. One recent study found that a total of 29% of its national U.S. sample reported moderate or frequent involvement in bullying, either as the bully, the victim, or both. This is particularly problematic in that there appears to be considerable personal cost to both the bully and the victims of the aggression. Bullying is associated with a host of negative factors, including poor social and emotional adjustment, infrequent close peer relationships, higher incidence of drug and alcohol use, poor academic achievement, and increased likelihood of criminal behavior. Victimization is also associated with negative outcomes, including anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. The phenomenon of bullying behavior inherently involves two people, the bully and the victim. The particular characteristic a bully exhibits is likely to vary from person to person. However, research has shown some common qualities. Bernstein and Watson found that bullies show a limited ability to relate to the emotional experiences of others. Although bullies may lack empathy for others, they do not seem to differ from their peers in terms of their self-esteem. Thus, it appears that bullies are not necessarily engaging in aggressive behavior to compensate for adequate self-views. They do appear to have a need to feel in control and powerful, and they are generally more defiant and oppositional with adults. Like their bullying counterparts, victim characteristics also vary from individual to individual, but some commonalities have been reported. Craig found that victims of bullying behavior experienced a heightened sense of anxiety that frequently led to feelings of depression. Carney and Merrill indicated that victims were more likely to have a limited social support network and low self-esteem. Research also indicates that being in the role of victim is a stable phenomenon, with some victims continuing to experience victimization for several years. Research has also shown academic declines in victims of bullying. The question of why victims are chosen by bullies is difficult to answer. Research shows that some victimization may occur because the victim responds passively to the aggressive intents of others. This type of victim tends to be insecure and withdraws when attacked. Other victims may alternate between the role of victim and the bully. These victims typically appear anxious, hyperactive, or aggressive and are perceived as having poor social skills by classmates. This behavioral pattern is not viewed positively by classmates and is typically interpreted as irritating or offensive. Educators and researchers have developed a wide range of services and programs to address the problem of bullying. There are measurement instruments that can help educators identify bullying and victims. Other resources include information on preventing bullying by increasing supervision, developing appropriate classroom rules, providing consequences for bullying behavior, and developing conversations with bullies and with their victims. The fundamental premise is that it is necessary to develop a school environment where students feel safe from physical and emotional harm so that learning can take place. Such programs have been found to reduce bullying by as much as 50%. Another important aspect of academic life that is directly impacted by students' morality is cheating. Students cheat for a variety of reasons: desire for better grades, peer pressure, assignments perceived as overly difficult, parental expectations, and the perception of the task as meaningless. As a result of these factors, many students willingly put themselves in a compromised position by copying another student's work, allowing others to copy their work, giving question answers to students in another class, or gaining access to exam questions before test administration. The prevalence rates for cheating vary across cultures and across grades within a culture. A 2001 national survey conducted by Rutgers Management Education Center for 4,500 high school students found that 75% of the respondents reported being involved in some form of serious cheating at least once. Other researchers have found similar results. Johnson and Farkas in 1997 found that 68% of 1,300 high school students reported the cheating problem as somewhat serious or very serious. Evans and Craig found similar results with 64% of middle school students reporting that cheating is a serious problem. Overall, research confirms that cheating across all students and grades has been increasing over the last few decades. One important question to ask is whether students perceive cheating behavior as dishonest. McLaughlin and Ross demonstrated that although there was general agreement about what constitutes cheating between students and teachers, students did not consider it cheating when they obtained old copies of tests. While there is some discontinuity between the ideas of students and teachers regarding what constitutes cheating, there is also a great deal of similarity. Research has also shown that students largely view the same types of behaviors as cheating as do teachers. The general similarity between teachers and students in their perception of cheating means that actual cheating is not due to a misunderstanding about what constitutes cheating. Rather, students appear to be knowingly engaged in acts of cheating. The obvious question is, why? Students justify cheating along many dimensions. There does, however, appear to be a similar theme expressed by both students and teachers that societal expectations are dramatically changing with respect to education. We're placing ever-increasing demands on our educators for higher academic success of students. Subsequently, students are feeling increasing pressure from the teachers to perform well. Parents also have higher academic expectations, given their belief that much of their child's future revolves around their academic record. These pressures give rise to the problem of learning for the recognition that success brings, rather than learning for the sake of gaining knowledge. Students who show a strong orientation toward learning instead of grades are significantly less likely to cheat. In order to address the serious cheating situation in this country, we need to adopt an approach to education where learning is not viewed as secondary or secondary to achievement. Public health studies show that youth violence is a pervasive and ongoing issue, and instruction in moral and social responsible behavior has become an increasingly popular topic in education. While there is much debate regarding causal factors in youth crime, many researchers propose a failure of the primary socialization process, a failure in the lessons learned from the early social experiences encountered by children. To combat this failure, researchers and educators have developed a host of educational approaches aimed at influencing morality. These approaches are based on the idea that behavioral disturbances we are seeing nationwide are attributable to inappropriate moral development during the early socialization period. Moral education programs focus on developing appropriate moral reasoning. Instruction typically takes place using moral dilemmas, encouraging children to construct their own sense of morality. Character education programs, on the other hand, focus more on the transmission of certain core values. Instruction takes place through activities allowing practice of moral behavior. Moral education has been criticized because it fails to provide right or wrong answers and is usually taught using examples rather than real-life situations. Character education has been criticized because it focuses too heavily on behavior and adoption of another's moral code, rather than thinking and self-creation of morality. Both of these approaches, however, may have a similar issue in that they focus heavily on components of morality, such as thinking, feeling, and behavior. How we think about amoral issues, how we feel about the issues, and what we actually do about the issues. The components of morality are extremely complex: thoughts, feelings, behaviors, with each component being made up of a multitude of subcomponents: feelings, fear, doubt, anger, joy. Studying how all these interact to generate morality is exceedingly complex, and some researchers suggest that this research may be beyond our current methodological and instructional capabilities. Barbeau suggests an alternative process approach to the conceptualization of morality rather than the component approach. Essentially, this approach moves away from the question of what a moral decision is made of. It focuses on the processes an individual engages in to come to a moral decision. Focusing on how one makes a moral decision instead of what constitutes a moral decision allows for progression toward a positive moral product without discovering the potentially unsolvable question of the basic composition of morality. The processes Barbeau defines are moral sensitivity, moral judgment, moral motivation, and moral character. This process approach does not imply a linear or a systematic process. Rather, all processes may proceed together, ultimately resulting in a particular action or lack of action. One of the benefits of this approach is that it allows for the identification of the reason behind a failure to make an appropriate moral decision or action. Once the faulty process is identified, instructional support based on this aspect of the process can take place. Thus, the process approach allows an individualized approach to moral instruction. Which instructional support is most appropriate in a given circumstance will depend on the nature of the problem. Not all moral or character-based programs address all moral processes, and some programs focus on only one of these processes. All of these approaches have research to support effectiveness, yet gains in moral behavior are at best moderate. There has been an overly broad estimation about what these programs are able to accomplish. Muriel Barbeau compares the public's response to moral education programs to the public's response to the introduction of the Head Start program. Both programs formed an initial expectation that they were to solve society's larger problems such as violence and criminal behavior. We have learned from the Head Start program, however, that such lofty outcomes measures are extremely difficult to document. Outcome measurements from the Head Start program have moved to more proximate or immediate effects, such as parental need for social services, school attendance, and appropriate grade for age placement. The moral education is poised to suffer from the same societal issues if care is not taken to develop systematic, specific, and realistic outcome measures. This is not to say that the programs are ineffective. Quite the contrary. Moral education programs show great promise. However, educators and researchers must be mindful that global theories about human nature usually make for poor dependent measures for childhood intervention. And that is it. Okay. Good. It's still running. That's good.